Brought to you by Raising the Vibe, a nonprofit organization supporting the growth of conscious communities.
Welcome, everyone. Rebecca Paris now with Raising the Vibe. We are a 501c3 nonprofit organization that started in Atlanta, but now we've gone global since we're doing all Zoom programming, so we can get people like Sierra out in California with us tonight too. So happy to have everybody here. Raising the Vibe started as it's really a connection hub for expanding consciousness, and we provide free Zoom speakers once a month now, all on Zoom now, and just providing all sorts of different topics. Iridology was fascinating. I'm so glad Dr. Demetry decided to share that with us tonight. We do a lot of holistic healing. We have a lot of self-actualization tools that we try to bring in, as well as other conscious community practices, just trying to widen the lens of people's perspective. The world is so much bigger than we know it, and it's fun to be seekers like we are, trying to learn as much as we can about the crazy world that we're living in right now. So again, it's all about positivity, mindfulness, trying to do the best we can to bring more love into the world. So with that, I'd like to introduce Dr. Demetry. He was actually our very first speaker. It was a couple years ago, I believe, when we were doing the in-person meetings in Atlanta. And he's an author. He spoke to us about his book, Divine Partnership then. And he's actually spoken to us several times on the Enneagram and the truth about 5G. So we're just blessed to have him back. He is a holistic psychiatrist, got his medical degree from Emory, and I believe it went to the University of Hawaii
Right.
for
Yeah.
transpersonal psychology. Did I get that right? Or
Transcultural, and then I
transcultural
moved into the
psychology.
other. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and he does all sorts of fun things, and unfortunately he's not able to travel as much, but he really loves taking groups to sacred sites, and does a lot of great spiritual programming around that. He does past life regressions. He does a lot of beautiful sound healing. So if you're in the Atlanta area, check him out. If not, and are you doing anything over Zoom as far as personal
I
treatment?
am. I can do personal sessions over Zoom, and also doing some Zoom seminars, mostly with European groups, but also they're open because they're in English, they're open to anybody as
Gotcha.
well. I can share that later if you'd like.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Good. Well, with that, let me see if I can, get you on speaker view there. And then I'll go ahead and have you get started then.
Great. Thank you. Okay. Well, welcome everyone. Um, a little background of how I got involved in learning about the RAID model. First of all, RAID is not actually technically iridology. It's a method of, it's actually an epigenetic study of how emotions, how thoughts, how parental relationships, how sibling relationships, how traumas impact us and create certain personality patterns. And the beauty of RAID is that in the iris of the eye, you have a mandala. And this mandala is a living mandala. And Carl Jung spoke of the concept of a mandala represents the self. It's the wholeness of your being, your conscious experience of life. Well, in the RAID model, you have a mandala. You have two. You have a right and a left. They never see each other, but they do cooperate at times. And so I learned about the RAID back in the early 1980s. I was living in Honolulu, and I'd met some alternative healers that invited me to a small seminar one weekend. And there I met Denny Johnson, who is the creator and originator of this method. And Denny he was, and I think continues to be, a spiritual mystic researcher that basically verifies things by continuing to work and research the inspirations, the visions that he has. And one such vision was of the RAID model, that we're all part of a universal community of beings, and that we are all part of this human family and we're all unique. No two iris structures are really exactly alike. Everyone's is very unique to themselves. And so I started learning at that time. Denny had, he would do sessions, he'd look into your eyes and then later take pictures on an iridology camera. And you could actually begin to see your life unfold before you throughout your life based on what you saw on this living mandala. And I found this amazing and really fascinating because it was something that could then perhaps help me to help others in my practice, my counseling psychiatric practice. And it's a method that creates a kind of intimacy because anytime you look into someone's eyes, you're making a connection. It's a very vital connection. And when you do this with an understanding of that being, it creates a tremendous heart rapport. And so I use RAID now, not extensively, but I use it as a kind of, check in and see what you're dealing with here in someone and help them understand that you're there with them and that you understand their human condition. And so what we're going to do is there's going to be a lot of visuals I'm going to show you in this process. And what I invite you to do is that as you look and as I describe these eyes that you'll be seeing, that you get an intuitive, a kind of resonance for what they say to you. Not necessarily about the actual personality of the person, but the structure. Like, what is this? What does it feel like for you? Is this hard? Is this easy? Is it soft? What does that say to you? And I'll be describing, of course, what they represent. Just as a side note, if you're really interested after this discussion, seeing a fascinating, fun film, a Hollywood film about eye irises, you can see a movie. And wow, where was it? oh, Eye Origins. There we go. I Like an Eye Origins. It's a movie that was done back, I think, in 2014 or something like that. And it's a beautiful story, basically about a scientist who has no beliefs in anything other than what he can see, observe. He wants to disprove the existence of God, and he decides that he's going to do this by genetically creating eyes on blind earthworms. So, so it's a funny thing, and he has a research assistant, and suddenly a woman enters his life, and she basically throws his life upside down. And her eye is shown in the movie as you start. You see her eye, and you'll later find out that she's a specific eye constitution called a shaker. She's a mover, a change, a pioneer, and they fall in love, and she has an untimely death and then later he sees those eyes on a billboard and he eventually finds the person who has those eyes. And it's the incarnation of this girl. And so it's a really cool movie. And so, so those of you that are more into like in spiritual, romance, intuitive, prove that spirit is real, you'll love this little movie. So what I want to do is get started with the eye pictures, if I can. But I'm trying to leave here. Okay, wait a minute. Okay. Um, is that okay, Rebecca? Nope.
Yeah, you are
Okay.
you don't have anything up and your screen is a little shaky. I don't know if you're moving your
Hmm.
computer, but you're shaking a bit.
What about now? Is that better?
Yeah, you're not shaking, but we don't see the screen share yet.
Okay. It's not a screen share yet?
Not a screen share yet.
Okay, just hold on a moment. Uh, Rafa?
Get the young person's help in here, right?
See if I can get to that. Where am I? Hold on, Rebecca, just a second. Sorry. Rafa?
Okay, I love this. Dr. Demetry is amazing. I'm glad he's like normal too.
Yeah, yeah, I know, right? It's like he doesn't like technology. He had his nephew in working with him earlier.
I'm glad he's still at the house.
Yeah, I know, right?
That's awesome. I'm excited about this. I have no clue what he's talking about, so I'm going to be watching carefully.
Yeah.
But is it not working? I don't understand.
She can't. Here, it's okay. Yeah.
So, what happened?
There. Mhm.
Is it
There
working
we
now?
go. Got it now.
All right. Okay.
Yeah, and yeah, the screen is a bit shaky, Rafa, so you just need to
That's
stabilize the screen.
actually the table I've got, I think.
Oh, the
Rebecca.
table. Oh.
Yeah.
Put
Okay.
some stuff under the table.
All right.
Okay.
So RAID describes, and by the way, the word RAID, id, we understand from psychology means the unconscious. And these would be rays of the unconscious revealed in the iris. When we look at the eye, I want you to just look at these 4 pictures I show you. On the left upper picture, we have what we call a jewel. This is a thinking type. On the right, there's what we call a shaker. That's a combination of emotion and thinking. Below, on the left, we have a physical or stream type. And on the right, we have a feeling type. So let's talk about these. What really constitutes the difference in these 4? What are they? Are we okay with what you can visualize so far? Okay. So let's talk about jewels. So a jewel, if you look at this eye, you'll see these dark pigmented areas. And these pigments indicate a thinking, intellectual individual. So mental types direct their perceptions and feelings through internal thought and analysis. They tend to be controlling of themselves, situations, and also other people. They're very good verbal communicators. They don't show emotion that frequently, and they use very pointed gestures. They don't use rounded gestures, but very pointed type gestures. They can be often intense, they can be very deliberate, and they're quietly driven to obtain their goals. So, what they really need is release. And they attract emotional types in relationship in order to actually get the release. So, once again, they're thinking, they're analytical, they are aware, alert, opinionated, good verbal communicators. They need to understand, they learn to expand, and they learn primarily through visual, that modality. So as you look at this, what sense do you have of that eye when you look at it? What energy comes to you from it? Just sense it for yourself. Is it soft? Is it hard? Is it directed? You can kind of get a sense of that just by looking at it. So these little pigmented areas are actually areas of constriction of energy. Jewels tend to hold energy rather than dissipating energy. So constriction is a centering, it's a binding, focused experience. very one-pointed. If you want to think of the quality of the jewel, it's like a diamond, or you think of an eagle with a very strong, clear vision, or even a wolf, if you will. That's the first eye type. You can also see that these specks or these jewels are located throughout the eye in different areas. Later, we're just going to show you a picture of how those areas can be read and understood. Each of the areas is an area of some kind of emotional significance to that person. It could be as a result of birth trauma. It could be a result of early childhood experiences, especially in relation to mother and father. And it could be a number of other things. And of course, there might even be past life experiences in there to consider. As we go on, we see a feeling type individual. We call these the flowers. If you look at this eye, what do you notice about it? Open, expanded, elliptical structures. It's moving out, at least in this particular eye. There's spatial perception, openness, very reactive, sensitive. They are good visual communicators. They learn through auditory ways. They need to be received, and they have to learn to concentrate and ground themselves. So again, you see these distinctly curved, rounded openings. They can be very open or they can be constricted. When they are constricted or small, it means that that emotional issue of that area is held more tightly. It hasn't been processed fully or opened yet. It might open through explosive behaviors, but it's not open in a kind of calm, peaceful, grounded way. The more open fibers indicate more of a flow of energy emotionally. Flower formation, the essence of silence and imagination. The parents of flowers in the iris indicate an influence of expansion. That's the active matrix of a flower. In terms of nature, think of the flower as a flower, a dove, or a deer. There's a kind of softness and a kind of emotional embracing going out of this eye type. Then we have the physical type, and we call them streams. And quite literally, the fibers of the eye are wavy and more or less straight, if you can see that. Now, you'll see there are areas that look more diffuse and sort of absent. And you could think of that again energetically as a movement goes toward a certain area and then it hits a weak point where it can't flow as strongly. And so that area would create a kind of absence of energy or an issue to be dealt with. Physical types are intuitive. They gather, they stabilize, they use body communication. They need security, and they have to learn to change. They need movement and change because they're very consistent. So other aspects of a stream would be the kinesthetic. They learn through their physical bodies. They perceive and integrate life through their sensory experiences of their body. With true empathy, they can nurture and balance others. They're very intuitive, yet grounded. And they kind of mediate extremes. They're not very extreme. They're very consistent, very predictable in a sense, but they need change. They can get very stymied if they don't get change. These types learn through auditory, visual, cues as well as imitation. So they need expansiveness, and they will tend to attract long-term relationships with extremists. And we'll talk about that shortly. One of the aspects of RAID is it works very much on the concept of the dynamics of polarity in life. The yin, the yang, the male, the female, matter, spirit. It's a sense of how energy works, and that the heart of each individual is seeking healing and unity. And so, whatever polarity you have, whether you're a stream, a shaker, a jewel, a flower, that you're going to be moving toward balance throughout your life. And we're going to talk about that. So, what's interesting is the dynamic that you may have started life, for instance, as a highly reactive and emotional person, and end up looking later in life is much more a jewel, more, grounded, more focused, more intellectual, more analytical. And you look at an eye structure and you say, wow, you should be way out there. Well, that structure is moving toward balance and toward the acquisition of inner power. The same with the jewels. They will move more toward the emotional side of things as they go through life. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. So here you have a stream. Stream formation, the essence of stillness and belonging. Embracing all with gentle strength, support, and service. Characteristic of water and earth. So you can get a sense of quality of that. Streams, oftentimes, their presence is a kinesthetic field. It's the best way to describe it. And they are very, they're great as massage therapists, as Reiki healers. They can be highly intuitive. Streams can also be good channels because they can just sort of channel out the energy. The fourth type is what we call the shaker, a movement type. What you'll see in this eye as you look at it is you'll see these flower elliptical areas, as you saw before with the flower, but you also see pigmented areas around the eye. Can you see that? So these pigmented areas represent jewel tendencies. So when you have flowers and jewels in the same eye structure, you have a shaker personality type. They are very dynamic. They change. They do a lot of transitioning between emotion, thought, movement. They're very dynamic. They're very pioneering people, very independent, but they need to learn stillness. Some other qualities of the shaker: uh, needing equilibrium, and that's one of the biggest things that that supports them, because they'll tend to go to extremes. That's why streams are a natural fit for a shaker in relationship, because the stream is grounding, the stream is consistent, and the stream, on the other hand, needs movement and change. Again, shaker, there needs to be at least one distinct flower and jewel in the iris, in the same iris. You can see that here too. You can see that there's the little dark specks, the jewels, and you also see the flower structures as well. So that's a shaker. That's a specific eye type. Now, you might ask, when you look at your own eye or you look at other people's eyes, well, it's rare that you get a classical flower, classical stream, a classical jewel. because what you see is combinations, but the fundamental structure, which is likely genetic based, it's like your constitution, your home, is going to be one of these four types. The other influences that we'll talk about are things like introversion, extroversion, right brain, left brain, and an area that everyone can determine for themselves if you look at your eye even now, which we call rings, the rings around the eye. So let's move on. By the way, shakers are often characteristically represented by earthquakes, tidal waves, and lightning. They're the shakers and movers of the universe. So I'm going to go on here. So let's do the review. Jules, thinking, analytical. Their communication is primarily verbal, strong words. They learn primarily through visual. They watch, they're good observers visually. Their postures, their gestures are more controlled and pointed. Their skills, their detailed leadership skills, very organizational. They have close connection and to flowers because this is their attraction point to learn emotions. And what they need for balance is flow and letting go. So one of the ways that I use RAID in my practice is if I look at an eye structure, it gives me an immediate connection to what's the overall need for that person in terms of an activity or something to help them find their dynamic balance. Because a lot of times when people, in the Jungian concept of wholeness, that whatever you're missing and whatever you're not addressing in your life will come to you and it's going to break your door down and it's going to make its appearance and it will appear like a shadow. It's like, oh my God, that demon, go away, you're killing me, whatever. But in fact, that's the very message the universe is trying to give you. So when we work with these eye types, a very simple thing is just understanding the basic um, wisdom of what they need to come into balance. And so for the jewel, it's letting go, flow. Um, Sometimes I've had jewels in the past in workshops where if you give them a pillow and you tell them just hit it and just scream and just let go, and they won't do it at first, and then they start doing it, and they start feeling wonderful, and then they don't want to stop. It's that kind of scenario. It's like let it go because they tend to get constricted and they hold. They don't have to go that far, but they have to learn to flow and let go. Let's go to the flower. The flower is an emotional type. The communication is mostly visual. They learn through auditory, through listening. Their gestures are animated and spontaneous and oftentimes more rounded. Their skills are visual and social. They tend to be at ease with social relationships. They form lifetime bonds with jewels. This creates a yin yang for them. And what they need for balance is focus. They need to learn to focus and to stay on target with their goals in life. The stream, intuitive, connective, they're kinesthetic, they're very tactile. Streams are great huggers. If you know when you're hugged by a stream, it's like it just flows through your body. Um, their learning is really through doing and experience. You could take a stream in therapy and you could talk to them, you could analyze them, you could try to get them to emote. But if you give them a structure of what they need to do to make change, then they learn much easier. They learn better. Their postures and gestures are more subtle, but not so obvious. Their skills are stability and support. They know how to support others, they know how to be steady with them. They form good balanced relationships with shakers. And what they really need to balance themselves is to initiate change. This is where they tend to get stymied and appear helpless. And what they'll do is they'll somaticize a lot of their emotions at that point. So if you have someone that you're working with, if you're a therapist, and you find them having a lot of psychosomatic symptoms, a lot of pains in the body, a lot of things, take a look at the eye and see if they're a stream. Quite often they will be. And they need to move something, change something in order to reestablish the flow within themselves. Major lessons. We talked about jewels before, but the important thing is that jewels fear criticism the most because they want to be in charge. When you criticize them, that kind of makes them fall apart. Uh, The primary lesson is humility, letting go of control, learning to become receptive. And the main thing they need to learn through life is trust. Flower types, they usually come from the belly. They respond to fear with emotions. The worst fear of the emotional reactive flower is abandonment. And they have secondary fears of poverty, responsibility, and losing social prestige. The primary lesson of the flower is focus, concentration, emotional self-control, and balance. And this is a lifelong process for them to learn power. What you could do for a moment, I would engage you to take a look at your eye. If you have a pen light or something, you can look and just see if you can see any structural, something you can identify with structurally in yourself. And it doesn't really matter which eye, both of your eyes will have fundamentally the same structure. Sometimes it's more difficult when you have totally brown pigmented eyes to see the structural variations, but do what you can. Just see if you look for those dots, those jewels, look for those ellipticals, the flower. If your eye is pretty clear and the fibers seem straight, that's more stream. If you see combinations of little elliptical areas in the fibers and those brown dots, or we call jewels, then you're probably a shaker, even if you just have one jewel in there. Okay, just an initial look. Another area of RAID is what we call right brain, left brain, hemispheres. Hemisphere dominance usually changes through life, or it's the area that changes in relation to trauma and toward an affinity of a particular parent, for example. If you're closer to your mother or you're closer to your father, most people that align more with mother start to shift toward right hemisphere balance, toward father left hemisphere balance. This is an example of someone who is left brain dominant. How do you decide that? And again, this is somebody looking at you so you can see that the right iris is the right iris and the left iris, correct? So the right iris is on your left and the other's on your right. So if you look at the right iris, which is the left photo, what you look for is the detail in the eye structure. Which eye seems to have the most detail? Now, both of these eyes seem to have a lot of detail, so it's easy to get lost in it. But what you see is on the left photo, you see a dark pigmented area. You see that? It's around 6, 7 o'clock at the bottom. And if you look at the overall structure, you see more ellipticals throughout the eye extending out with the left eye photo, or the left photo, than the right. So that means that this right iris, which is the left photo, corresponds with a left brain dominance. All right? The left iris corresponds with right brain dominance. So dominant left brain types are logical, they're self-oriented, they're more practical, they ask questions, they have material goals, they prefer to be organized, they normally have greater rapport with their father. And here's an interesting one, is that they tend to want to sleep on their right cheek down. I don't know what, that's not an absolute, but it's a tendency. Needing to learn flexibility and broad-mindedness, they attract right brain dominant types in romantic relationship. So I don't want you to get confused, but what we can say is you could be a flower type, and you could be right brain, and you could meet a flower type that's left brain. So even though you're the same type and you share the same fundamental traits, the dominance of brain hemispheres creates an attraction point for healing. So if you understand, it would mean that there are different polarities that are at work in your personality that create this need for wholeness. So it doesn't have to be just flower attracts jewel, shaker attracts stream. You could also have similar structures that have dominance differences. So right brain in the iris. If you look at this picture, the right photo has more activity with the jewels. You're going to see many more jewels in the right than the left. Can you see that? Is that clear? Okay. And so that would mean that's the dominant eye. So the left iris, remember there's a crossover. Left is connected to right hemisphere, right to left hemisphere. I know this gets sometimes confusing, but it's the opposite. So your left eye is connected to right, your right to left. So if you want, you can look again in your eye structure and see if there's a noticeable difference between your right and left eye. Sometimes there is, sometimes there's not, and I'll explain that in a moment. But this is an example for you. This is a jewel eye structure, and it shows much more activity in the right photo, or this is right brain dominance. Right brain dominant people are very social, they're more agreeable, they tend to be more cluttered, they usually have a closer relationship with mother, they tend to sleep on the left cheek down, they're more philosophical, future oriented, they need to learn practicality, and they're attracted to left brain dominant types in intimate relationships. I just want to show you what we mean by the changes that occur during the course of life. We look at the flower, and these are the stages of life that the flower takes. Again, remember what we are saying is that there's always this movement to bring balance and create a dynamic power in the personality. So this flower, we look here, the flower's first step, if you look on the far right of this picture, you see focus 1. First step is a flower needs to learn to concentrate. As they learn concentration and focus, they learn to become more alert, more present, more responsible for themselves and their activities. The third step is they ground, they become more still inside. They don't have these strong movements of emotions as much. They can focus more easily. And then they unify with themselves and they begin to produce. They begin to build and develop. It's interesting that flowers have a tendency to become more left brain throughout their life. Approximately 90% of all flower type personalities will develop childhood feelings of anger or separation with their mother. It's real interesting. You wonder sometimes, what comes first, the chicken or the egg when you think of this, because in truth, your structure is like a kaleidoscope. It's how you filter information from the world. You could take two people, and they could be from the same family, it could be siblings, and they may have an entirely different experience with their parents. And so somehow they're filtering that information in very different ways. They may be. And so in this case, flowers tend to develop separation or anger feelings in relation to their mother, and that pain shuts down the feeling functions of the right brain and opens skills of self-control and logic that are characteristic of the left brain. Now, in a way, this is kind of interesting because if the universe is conspiring to bring you into balance, who's really at fault in family systems? Think about it for a moment. That there is a dynamic interplay of energy and resonance and dissonance that's going on beyond the obvious. And that's the whole point of RAID, is to look at the unconscious, what's really happening inside the individual. And also to say there's no fault here. There's only the heart's need to find forgiveness and understanding, because we are dynamic beings and we are here to balance, to learn, to grow, and to become more soulful. So what serves that purpose in our family system? So even though, for instance, in this case, this feeling type flower that's bubbling with emotion is suddenly feeling more shut down, it will create feelings of aloneness, this movement from right to left brain, but it opens lessons of focus, emotional self-control, and stability. So there is shall we say, a reason to the madness in this. Jewel lessons and stages of life. First step is opening more to life and to their feelings by developing humility, like I can learn something from people around me. That creates more calmness as they begin to open. They can learn more detachment from their intellect and become more aware of what's really in the now going on in their experience. And then they learn how to flow more and release. And that's a process they go through in the course of their lives. So thinking type jewels, they encounter also lessons as they cycle through their stages of maturity. So jewels have a tendency to become more right brain throughout life. At least 90% of all jewel types develop childhood feelings of resentment with their father and other authority figures. Feeling the loss of recognition or criticism from their father serves to shut down the left brain as it opens the more feeling qualities of the right brain. And again, this can bring pain and suffering, this left to right brain movement, but it opens lessons of humility, feeling, and receptivity. So, as you hear this, just let yourself feel in your own experience what is going on in you. Which parent did you feel close to? Which did you feel more adverse with? How might have that made a difference in how you shifted your hemispheres? Just another point, another thing that will shift hemispheres very rapidly in childhood or even in adulthood are very big traumas. If you have a sudden, unexpected trauma of a kind, like a near-death experience or something that really, life-death kind of experience, or something that just overloads you with stress, in that moment, you could actually start to shift your brain dominance in order to protect yourself from too much extreme in the way of emotions, or on the other hand, too much control that could then injure your system. All right, let's see. I'm just going to scale through these pretty quickly. Don't worry, you don't have to be looking at this. Oh, here we go. This is fun. So, relationships. We have, three, four basic types of relationships. We have what we call complementary relationships. Complementary would be more, two different eye structures, like the jewel with the flower, or the stream with the shaker. We have similars relationships where we have really the same type of eye structure, the same disposition, but we have maybe some differences, either in introversion, extroversion, or right hemisphere, left hemisphere balance. Then there are things called love-hate relationships. Yes, believe it or not, these are relationships. They drive people crazy, but they also have a deep bond of love. So it goes on. So you can see that we are learning. When we come together with someone in partnership, we are exchanging energy. And that energy exchange, it has much, much in the way of information. And again, it's a play of the yin and yang and the movement toward learning wholeness in some area of life, in some way. So here you have this on the top left photo, we have a jewel, and on the bottom right, a flower. That's a kind of instant connection match. On the upper right, you have the shaker. You can see the jewels and the flower structures in this one. And then on the lower left, the stream. And that's also a very dynamic, complementary type relational connection. Wild action shaker meets grounded stillness stream. They can't resist each other. Soon they buy a house and a high-powered van. The stream stays home while the shaker drives too fast in the neighborhood and gets arrested. Life is designed for balance. It's funny. I've seen so many really funny dynamics when it comes to these complementary and different types of relational dynamics going on. And they need each other. This is an interesting. Some people could say, well, it's a codependency, but underneath that dynamic is a dynamic process of learning that's going on. All right. Let me see if I can go to the other slide. Okay. All right. This just gives you another picture that you can look at that designates the fibers. Now, sometimes people ask me, what are iris fibers made of? What are these things? And they are connective tissue, smooth muscle, and small capillary vessels. And so there's a flow within this. It's interesting that The brown people with brown irises actually make up 90% of the population. Blue is about 10%, and if you have a blue iris, you don't even have to do the 23andMe DNA. Just go back to the original single ancestor. We're all connected. If you have blue iris, you're all connected to the single original ancestor, which is interesting. Um, the blue iris isn't really blue. It's actually how light scatters toward the viewer that makes it appear blue. You see that same effect in this beautiful blue butterfly. It's called a morpho. I don't know if you know it. It's not, the wings are actually clear, but in fact, they appear blue because they're reflecting light at that angle. So in jewel, these fibers, you can see they're straight fibers, the upper left photo picture, and you have the little specks, these little jewels. Some people ask, do these change over life? Like when you change your personality, when you go through time and you go through your experiences, they do change. For example, in the case of jewels, oftentimes they become less rough, they become more polished, if you will. It's one way of putting it. For streams, a lot of times the stream fibers get stronger where there's an absence of the fibers. In flowers, you see these on the bottom left, you see these sort of circular fibers. Sometimes what you'll see is that as you process and work through a closed elliptical, say that's more closed, there's an opening that starts to take place. Shakers, you look for both. You look for changes in the actual jewels in the shaker eye as well as the ellipticals. If the ellipticals are held very tightly, then there's a lot of emotion in there. And the ellipticals that are held tightly near the pupil are more mental issues. It's like the mental issues are very close to the pupil. We'll show you a picture in a moment. And then the emotional is the second layer, and then the physical would be the third going out. Now, I'll show you that. So you can see these are the eyes, the right and the left. The issue areas manifest in these three circles. You see the mental, emotional, and physical layers. So the upper part of the eye, if you look at the top area, is usually issues having to do with life direction and the mind, your thinking process, your attitudes, your beliefs. The area directly below at the bottom is more the creative side and more about yourself and your will. And then you have the left and right sides. On the left side, you see that's more the periphery, social experiences and emotions. The inner side is more intimate areas. I'll show you here. Don't get floored, but these are the issue areas that you can discover in the eye. They are immense. They're 46 areas. When there's a trauma or when there's experience of neglect or when there's a tendency to bond more closely with one parent and distance another parent, or when one has trauma such as early childhood trauma, sexual traumas, these kinds of things, this will appear in the eye in certain locations. And all of these, I don't want to really go through this at this time because it's immense. But you can see that if you look, see if I can. This would be the right eye. This is father. You can see on the inner side, intimate subconscious emotions, attitudes are going above, pathways of choice, and social emotions. So these are the different regions. These are the quadrants we look at. And so, for example, if you had a jewel in one area, like say you had a jewel in area 1, 1 is the area of nurturing, okay? So it's the ability to initiate social affection, creativity, reliability, intelligence. There, you can get a RAID chart. You can order a chart, and it will show you all the issue areas and what they represent. Then you can take time to study it. You can study your own eye. You can look at your family members, and you can better understand their history, quite literally, their emotional history, their childhood history, and so on. So this just gives you an indicator of how much there is in the iris. And don't get overwhelmed. I'm constantly, I refer back to the chart all the time, especially as I get older. I refer to it again and again uh, to really better understand. So say you had, for example, in area 1, the area of nurturing, say the fibers are open and they move all the way to the periphery. That would probably suggest that there is a connectedness, a flow, an openness to that parent, that nurturing, and your expression of nurturing with others. If it's closed, if it's held, or if there's a jewel in that area, there's an issue that revolves around maybe your thought processes, your attitudes. Do you follow what I'm sharing so far? Is it clear? Okay, good, good. All right, let's see now. Um, Let me go back here. Let me see if I can get to. All right, now introversion, extroversion. I want to go into this a little bit. We have time, Rebecca. We okay with time?
Yes, we're
Okay, good.
right at 8 o'clock, so I don't know if we
All
want to
right.
have time for questions or anything, but yeah, we're good.
Sure, sure. I'll give some time for questions. I just want to show you the introversion, extroversion, and the rings because this is something you can immediately look at in your own eye. If you've seen nothing else, you'll be able to see the rings. So if you look at this, we're looking at how extrovert energy and introvert energy works. The extrovert tends to deflect and release life energy, moving out. Extroverts have more of a tendency to complain of exhaustion because they tend to release and move energy constantly out into the environment. Introverts, on the other hand, tend to gather and store life force energy. So, for instance, you could be a flower, an emotional type, but you could be an introvert, which means that you have more of a sort of retaining of your emotions and your focus, and they may be more internalized and less available for immediate expression. On the other hand, if you're an extrovert, you might have immediate sort of expression of those emotions. But if you're an extrovert with a left hemisphere dominance, what would that do? It would tend to contract and pull things in. So you see, you have to understand these different dimensions of RAID in order to kind of get a real gestalt of what that person is really about and what you're about. So as we go here, we see extrovert, greater range of social influence, introvert, lesser range of social influence, range of perception, extrovert, everyone is looking at me. Introvert, I am watching everyone. Don't know if there's familiarity for you in either of these, but this is a tendency. How do we tell if there's an extroverted eye or an introverted eye? So look at the pupil, the dark center of the eye, and you'll see the jewel. It says jewel introvert. There's the pupil, and then immediately it appears that the iris starts. Do you see that? There's nothing separating the pupil from the iris. It's just a beginning, a continuity. There's the pupil, and there are the fibers of the iris. Do you see that? Okay. On the shaker side, you see a similar situation. There's a concentration of pigmentation toward the pupil. And again, there's a beginning. There's no ring. You're always looking to see if there's an actual ring around the pupil, and that indicates more extroversion or introversion. If we look at the stream, you also see a similar thing. There might be a very, very little ring, but it's very, very contracted. Pretty much the pupil, and then you see the beginning of the fibers. The flower introvert, it's quite similar. You see the pupil, but you don't see a clear ring. In fact, a lot of the flowers are directly connected to the pupil. Can you see that? So this would be introversion. What are the characteristics of introversion? The tendency for the introvert, the breathing tends to be primarily through the nose, and it's slower. Energy pattern, introverts tend to build and store internal energy. And the essence of the introvert is being more sensitive, congenial, tolerant, insightful, and more conceptual in their orientation. The communication style of an introvert is more quiet and observant. Their gestures would obviously be less animated, more contained. And the behavioral effects of introversion is to decrease communication, increase sensitivity, and increase wisdom. The types of professions you often see, the introvert would be those teaching, counseling, design. Gifts, stability, empathy, integration, and appreciation. And the lessons for the introvert to be learned is, of course, self-expression, truthfulness, and decisiveness. The extrovert has another example, is another type of structure. So if you look at these eyes, what do you notice? You'll see the arrow pointing to a kind of ring around the pupil, and it's expanded. It's not directly, it's not a direct connection between pupil and that ring. The ring is actually open. This is an extroverted eye structure. So you can actually look at your eyes now, if you'd like, to see if you have a more extroverted or a more introverted structure. As you look at these extrovert eyes, you can also perhaps see that most of these are showing more extreme extroversion. The kind of ring around the pupil is much more, it's broader, it's more expanded out. It doesn't have to be that extreme. It could be closer, for example. Another phenomena you see is when a person who is extroverted, you see that ring goes out. What happens if you see that ring out, but you see a concentration of brown inside that ring? That would indicate that that individual was born extrovert, but somewhere along their life experience, they got pushed to introversion. Let's look at the characteristics of the extrovert. They breathe primarily through the mouth. Energy patterns, they release energy, they generate peripheral energy. The essence is forthright, more social, more practical. Communication style is expressive. They're more animated in their gestures. The behavioral effects, of course, extroversion increases communication. It will decrease sensitivity. It increases honesty and directness. professions, their tendency of things like management, public relations, entertainment. But it's not exact. It's not that you're an extra. If you're not an extrovert, if you're an extrovert and you're not in those fields, it doesn't mean you're in the wrong field. Gifts, achievement, coordination, manifestation, lessons to be learned, stillness, respectfulness, patience, and inner giving. Okay, I think we did brain dominance, but let's just go a little bit into that more. Excuse me, here we are. Right brain dominance. Most iris traits, left eye. Remember, left eye, right hemisphere. Left eye, right hemisphere. Left eye would have the most iris color or detail. If you look at your thumbs, look at the half moons on your thumbs. Sometimes you can see the expression of dominance in those half moons. Uh, the left would be higher, typically, if you are right brain dominant. If your half moons are pretty much the same, that's going to indicate that you're probably more balanced in your brain hemisphere dominance at this point. The upper eyelid of the right brain dominant individual will tend to droop more. Right brain dominance people tend to interlace their fingers with their right thumb on top, just unconsciously, they do it. Skin tone smoother, almost glossy skin. Uh, Neck, shoulder pain is usually on the left side. Uh, in terms of how they stand, they tend to put more tilt on the left foot. They will tend to sleep primarily on their left side, partner on the right. Partner or self talks more. Attracts partners who act younger or childlike. Familial rapport is more on the mother's side. Difficulties with father or men. The outline of the face tends to resemble the mother's side of the family. And oldest child in the family system is often female in this case, if they're siblings. There's a whole study of RAID that I'm not going to really talk about now. It's called birth position. It's like, where are you within your family? Are you the firstborn, second, third, fourth? And Denny has charts that deal up to, I think, 5 or 6 children and the disposition and qualities that will tend to develop in them depending on your birth position. It's really fascinating work. So again, disposition of right brain dominant people, more spontaneous, accepting, future oriented. Energy is more feminine, creative, imaginative, intuitive. Behavior, they can get spacey or very casual, easygoing. They can even get sloppy. This drives left brain people crazy. They want to put everything in order, and the right brainers tend to clutter and put things in different places and whatnot. Orientation of right brain dominance, group-oriented, sociable, conceptual, conversational style, agreeable, but yet opinionated. And they're quick to respond, and their big fear is rejection. So let's just go quickly through the left brain dominance example. So here you have examples of left brain dominance. If you look at the right eye, which of course is the left photo, there's a greater number of traits in the right iris, and especially on the top, you can see that pretty clearly. You see more detail, and you see the jewels, many more jewels. Then below, you have also the same. You have the left brain dominant. The right eye has more overall activity. to it. It's a little hard to see, but if you look, you can kind of see what I mean there, especially with the ellipticals above on the higher quadrants. Indicators of left brain dominance, right eye, most color is in the right eye. Thumb half moons, the right tends to be higher than the left. And it's interesting that the thumb half moons, I've watched this throughout my life and I've watched it in people, is that it will change. Sometimes, you'll go several months and it'll be balanced. Then you might be engaged more in a certain activity or more processing emotionally or more intellectual activity. And you might actually see a change in the moons. And that's a sense of change in a little bit of a change in the hemisphere balance. Other things, interlaced fingers, left thumb is usually on top. They'll tend to stand on the right leg on top of the left. Skin tone tends to be coarser. Pain is more on the right side. They tend to tilt more on the right foot. They sleep more on the right side, partner on the left. Their partners will talk more. They'll tend to talk less. They will tend to attract older, more secure partnerships. Father's side is more where they have their rapport, more difficulty with mother. Face outline resembles father's side of family, and oftentimes the oldest child in the family is male. Disposition more fixed, doubtful, traditional, slower to change. Energy is more masculine, logical, practical, factual. They tend to be more compulsively ordered, more restless. Their orientation towards self and achievement orientation, more materialistic. They're more questioning, contradictory, interruptive, more slow to respond, and their fear is being alone. So we're just going to look at the rings and then we'll open it up for discussion. Is that okay? Are we on target all right, or are y'all getting exhausted?
Yeah, just a few more minutes, and yeah, I'm sure people would like to share. So that's
Okay,
great.
right. This is something that you can readily view in your eye. If you want to take a look, there are 4 rings, and these rings have more to do with a kind of intention that you carry deep within your soul. There's the ring of harmony, the ring of freedom. I also call that the ring of determination instead of the ring of freedom, the ring of purpose, or actually the ring of determination. And let's see, we can also call it, they used to call it the ring of freedom, the ring of accomplishment. I like that better, actually. It seems to describe it better. So let's talk about them briefly. The ring of harmony, you could see as little white areas along the periphery of the eye. People who have the ring of harmony, they tend to have high ideals of themselves and others. The greatest strength is influencing others, but when they're imbalanced, they are easily taken advantage of or influenced. And they get disappointed, they can get cynical, they can easily get depleted and overwhelmed. So they achieve balance through learning to slow down, to rest, to rejuvenate, to be honest, and have faithful expression, to build personal harmony and knowing. So the ring of harmony is interesting because there is a sensitivity in these people where they do have those high ideals. They can be easily disappointed. They can be easily taken advantage of in order to kind of keep things in harmony. And so they need to learn their boundaries and need to learn how to recharge themselves and to speak honestly and to set their boundaries with others, especially if they're being rubbed the wrong way. What he calls the ring of freedom. This is pretty easy to see, especially in darker eye structures. They're like, you can see there are these rings. They're the lighter rings around this. You can see the deep furrows in this brown eye, but you can see around these rings, these whitish or yellowish rings. All right. These people are often achievement oriented, and they're motivated to produce. And when they're out of balance, they can get very frenetic, anxious, and helpless. Sometimes I'll have people in my practice that'll come in and they tend to be very work oriented and very structured and want to move things and do things quickly. And when they get stymied, they really can get very scattered in themselves, get anxious, get helpless. They could achieve balance by learning to be appropriate and to focus their action and through giving. The ring of purpose, where you see this, look at the periphery of the eye. You see that the fibers don't go all the way out toward the end. There's almost like a kind of a dark area at the real periphery of the eye. So the ring of purpose is this continuous blue or dark peripheral band. And people that have a ring of purpose, they have this special sense of having a mission. Their greatest strength is they can be poised, they can be calm. When they're out of balance, they get confused, they can get indecisive, they can get stagnant. They need to learn to achieve balance by learning diligence, commitment, and alertness. They're best when they are living their purpose in a very practical way. It's very interesting, just sometimes when you watch TV, it's great. You can see eyes. It's fun to look at eyes and to understand the structure of people. I often wondered, certain athletes that are very driven. Tom Brady, the quarterback that's won, I don't know, 7 Super Bowls. He's got a huge ring of purpose in his eye. So there is this drive and this idealism that keeps him moving towards something greater, something better, and it keeps them going in that way. What they have to learn is to actually ground that ideal or purpose, to make it real for themselves. If they don't make it real for themselves, what happens to them? They can just stay in their ideals and their philosophical ideas, but they never can really make it real. It stays abstract, if that makes sense. And there's one more. It's called the ring of determination. This is a whitish ring around the eye and a white band. Sometimes you can see part of the ring of the eye with a white band. It doesn't have to be the full eye. And in this case, there's a kind of decisive certainty of the self, a determination, a boldness. But when it's out of balance, they tend to get defensive, they get unyielding, they get stubborn, they get out of touch with things. They can become very obsessive with their something in their life that they can't flow with. They achieve balance by learning acceptance, inner attentiveness, spiritual direction, to slow down and to be still. So people I've known with this kind of ring would tend to get very fixed on certain ideas, on certain courses of action. Sometimes they will sabotage themselves because they won't easily open to just flow and accept other opinions and views. But once they connect spiritually, they can do it. It's not so easy to do it for them mentally, but it's much easier to do it for them if they can make spiritual connection. Then they see the broader picture and they can get out of that mental framework. So there you have it. That's what I decided to present to you so that you can get an overview. You can go to a site called Rayed International. Denny lives, I believe, in Australia now, or at least the last I heard. But there's someone that works with his educational uh, material in Boulder, Colorado, and you can actually order a basic RAID course. It's very nice. I've shown you some of the pictures of that here. And you can also learn with a lot of online. You can get a CD, and there's enormous number of files that you can explore and learn about a number of things about RAID. It's another like the Enneagram that I also love. I love intuitive systems that seem to get into those. It's a lifelong study. You can continue to work with it and explore and understand. And I believe Denny's done, I don't know how many thousands of eye exams. I'm sure, um, hundreds of thousands by this point in time. He started in the 70s. And there's a lot of more detailed information that involves a lot of the dynamics of how personality forms, how we shift, how we grow, and so on. So I encourage you to work with it. I like to do eye readings. Right now, I don't have an eye camera, but if people want to take their eyes, a shot of their eyes through a good camera, uh, we can do an eye reading. I can take a look and give you some understanding or information. I do encourage you to start by looking at your own eyes and looking at your partners as well. Um, you'll probably discover things like in the Enneagram, you discover something in your partnership and it makes a big difference in your capacity for compassion, for example, and understanding and love. So I suggest you do that. Just before I complete my monologue here, just to say that I do sessions online. I do past life regressions, regression work, healing work, long distance, and also do, of course, right now, my adventures, my uh, uh, work with taking groups to other sites has been curtailed strongly by the the epidemic, the pandemic, but I am attempting to schedule in July a trip to Greece, providing that Americans can, uh, travel again. It's in July. If you're interested in information on that, I'm just going to give you one of our participants. It's a email. It's SICOSTA, Cy Costa Santos. So it's SICOSTA SANTOS /@gmail.com. She'll have information about details of this trip to Greece we're planning in July. Actually, Greece is opening up in May, and as long as one is either vaccinated or has a negative COVID test, if things continue along the lines that they're on, and they allow for travel from the United States, then it's possible that the trip will happen. The title of the trip is Freedom Here and Now. I think a good title for what we're going through. So anyway, I leave you with that, and also if you have questions, if there are things that you wonder about, or you have, we can spend some time with that. I know there's not much time left, but we can perhaps take a few questions, Rebecca, if that's possible.
Yeah, that would be great. Let me just type your email. So it's
Okay.
what's your best email?
So it would be M Demetry, M is in Mary, Demetry,
Uh-huh.
24,
What is it? 24?
24 at
Uh-huh.
gmail.com.
Okay, I just put that in the chat, and it's
Got it.
S.I. Costa Santos. You said slash at Gmail. I just put Santos at gmail.com.
Yes, that's it.
Si
And
Santos at gmail.com. Okay.
right. And also, or my telephone, you can message me at 404-723-4931.
404-723-4931. I put that in the
Correct.
chat. You guys can
Yeah.
chat the chat if you need to.
All right. And also, I also do a lot of sound healing work, but I like to do it more with people who are directly here. I have a large collection of Tibetan and alchemical crystal singing bowls, and I work with them quite often in my sessions with people. So anyway, that's in a nutshell. That's some of the work that I'm involved in.
Great. And putting us back on gallery view.
Okay.
Check out the chat. But that was fantastic. I was taking frantic notes here, and if anybody, we're about out of time, so if anybody needs to just slip off, just have at it, and you guys can close out. But I thought we could just spend a few more minutes for those who want to stick around and talk about it. But
Sure.
I absolutely loved that. It was spot on for me, and I'll just share what I figured mine was, and if anybody else wants to
Sure.
share theirs. I am a stream extrovert, left brain with a very strong ring of purpose. And it
There
totally
you
makes sense
go.
for who I am. So
Wow.
it's
Super.
interesting, isn't it?
It is. It is. That's great.
Yeah. Anybody else want to share?
Yes.
Go ahead, Sierra.
I feel like I'm kind of mixed on a lot of things. My eye looks pretty, I wrote in the chat, very streamy, but I
Uh-huh.
have like a couple jewels, especially in my right eye.
Okay.
So does that make me a shaker?
Do you see any elliptical areas, or you see the circular areas at all?
Uh, Not quite like the flowers as pronounced as the flowers you showed on the
Okay.
images. But they're, yeah, so I don't know, but the color is also really unique. It's
Uh-huh.
like gold and kind of gold on the inside, and
Okay.
then it goes to green, and then I have like a really thick ring of purpose that's super dark
Yeah.
green.
Right, right. Okay. Well, it sounds like, yeah, the ring of purpose we've got, and if you have one jewel, that still indicates your what I call a stream jewel. You
Mm.
have more of a stream disposition. That's probably primarily what it is. But you might have one concentrated area. If you get or look at the chart, you can look at what that area is, and that might be a focus of a lot of mental activity for you. So it may have also a grounding tendency in a way, but it might be a fixed thinking also about something in life.
Uh-huh. Well, it was really fascinating. I've always wondered what the dark ring meant,
Right,
because it's like
right.
so pronounced in my
Yeah,
eye, like, and
yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. I have a huge ring of purpose too. And when I finally realized it, when I got a reading from Denny many years ago, it was like, oh, now I get it.
Classic. So Sierra, I think we have very similar eyes. The way you described it is like pretty much exactly mine.
oh
The
wow,
color,
green
the ring of
too.
purpose, the one jewel. It's interesting.
Wow, we'll have to compare eyeballs.
Yeah.
Anyone
Thank you.
else?
I had a question. Do you have more pictures of brown eyes? I mean, looking at what was on there was a couple that were brown, but
Yes,
it's really
yeah.
hard to kind of see, especially for my.
Right. I do have more pictures. I don't have them on these slides. The reason that we weren't using as many brown eyes for instruction is it's just easier to see the traits so you can learn. But
Right.
the truth is, most of the eyes I look at are brown eyes.
Mhm.
So yeah, so it's important. You can also from the red model, you can get a very nice chart that shows a lot more in terms of eyes and relationship guides. Like I don't have it on, but you have all these are different kinds of relationships. These are
Okay.
describing many, many different people and what it shows. So you can learn from that. But when you have a darker eye structure, if you have a brown pigmented eye structure, you want to look closely for ellipticals. The jewels in a brown eye structure tend to be more diffuse. So it's not like you can see necessarily a specific jewel, but it could be a diffuse area where there's a sort of a brown, cloudy area over an area like that.
Mm. Okay.
Yeah, that's what you can look for as
Okay.
well.
Well, thank you.
You're welcome. Anyone else?
Yeah, anybody question or share with a comment?
Yeah,
Mine were brown, and I can't figure out anything because I don't know. It just looked all brown.
Okay.
So I'd probably
Um,
have to have a professional look at them and tell me because I can't figure anything out. But I mean,
right.
I know what I am like, and
Uh-huh.
I did seem like I was a jewel person, but then I'm an introvert.
Uh-huh. Okay. Um,
So
you,
I don't know. But yeah, I'd like to have somebody look at them
yes.
and tell me. I think this is the most fascinating science ever. So amazing.
Yes, you may just need to get a good magnified picture of your eye because you probably have some subtle things, subtle characteristics in there that could be understood once you
Yeah.
do that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's hard for me to see, like, without my glasses, then I can't really see. And if I take them off, then I can't even see anything. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
I need like a professional to look at them because I find I'd
Right.
love for them to tell me about myself. I think it's fascinating.
Yes. Okay. Yeah, yeah, you should send your eyes along. We'll see what we can find. See, but you do need to, there are iridology cameras. People can actually take a photo,
Hmm.
and you can then look more closely and you'll discover some interesting things in there.
Would I find it like at an eye store, or where do you find a camera
Well,
like that?
you could, I don't know in your area, what area you're in, but you could check and see if anyone does iridology in your area, physical iridology, and then they could take a picture. Like let's see, the camera that they recommend if you're doing this work professionally is 24 megapixel Nikon, a DSLR with a zoom lens, 18 to 55 millimeters. So if you have a good camera that can zoom in on things, somebody could still take a picture of your eyes, I think.
Sierra, did you have something?
I do have a question, but I think Eugene wanted to share, and then I can ask my question.
yeah. So my question would be this. Have you had an experience in your research where you found someone whose color changes to multiple colors?
You know, I've never actually seen that. Of course, I'm going to joke. I'm saying that's kind of an alien tendency, but
Well, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. You know,
no, no,
and
no.
yes, we are all jewels, Sierra.
Okay.
Yes, no doubt.
There we
So,
go.
so
Yeah.
there's when I fill out my driver's license, I just repeat, repeat,
Mm.
repeat because that's what they like to see, but I'll never
Right.
tell. But there
Yeah.
there have been other humans who like to look very closely and sometimes very, very closely. The reason I showed up actually was because of the movie Eye Origins and recent
Yes.
background of Buddhism. So if
Yes.
one is aware and they're familiar with the five eyes, here's inside nightly humor. The first eye is the one that always lies to me. That's the little tiny baby eye of the ego.
Uh-huh.
The next two eyes, that would make three eyes. Now we're going to go to the fourth one, which would commonly called the third eye.
Third eye.
But the fifth eye is the eye supreme that is in all of these precious jewels that showed up. And God bless you all. Thank you all. The movie Eye Origins should blow your mind, because India, I'm sure you already know, Nick, they've been capturing eyes,
Mhm.
recording and logging now for years.
Yes.
Okay. And when we take a look at karma and the rebirth, no matter where we come from, we're going to still move on from this little temporary house called a body and into, well, some of us may come back to another one. Some of us may choose to move a little higher than this domain. But God bless you. Thank you. I appreciate you.
You're welcome. Thank you. That was wonderful. Wonderful sharing. And that is a great movie. I highly recommend you go see it. And look at the eye of the girl. You can type her. Yes.
So my question was, is color strictly genetic?
That's a good question. I think it has a strong genetic base. But keep in mind in traditional iridology that some people, when they detox significantly, they will have a change in eye color. There will be some changes, like especially in there's certain areas of the eye that are of a darker color. They might lighten up more. So I can't tell you for a fact, but I think it is genetically based, but it can change. So I don't know if your eye has your eye changed color over time?
Not so much, but my dad's have actually.
Okay,
My dad's
yeah.
eyes, I mean, as far as I was told, he's always had green eyes, but as he's gotten older, they've turned a little bit more blue, like
Yeah,
crystally light greenish blue.
right.
And then,
Yeah, yeah. I think so, of course. If you're seeing the change, it does exist. And also, as Eugene was saying, he's seen the change in his eyes. Um, it's intriguing as to what that really means. If it's not a change of detoxing or a change of accumulating toxins, then what could it be? And it might relate also to ancestral or past life issues. So that's just another area that, I
does does the rayid go into color at all? Like, is there any meaning or significance behind color? That was
I
kind of
don't,
the other half of my
yeah, that's the
question.
other half. Not so much in that area, at least in my own awareness, it doesn't. It's more about the structure
Okay,
and about how that changes over time.
thank you.
Yeah,
Fascinating that
you're
you
welcome.
asked that. I was born with pretty, well, I was born, I'm sorry, my phone went up. I was born with really pretty dark brown eyes, and they've switched. And then when I was in college, somebody's like, "You have gold eyes." Now I have like gold in the middle and green on the outside, and then the ring of purpose. I mean, they've dramatically changed. So I
Right.
had to change my when I would consider myself brown-eyed kid, and then now I put hazel
Hmm.
on my driver's
Wow.
license. It's interesting.
It is
Wow.
interesting. Do you remember we were saying that when you looked at the ring of not the ring of purpose, but the ring of extroversion,
Mm-hmm.
that usually it's very clear where the pupil ends and that ring begins. But you may see eyes, and he actually in that movie Eye Origin, this girl's eyes, I think she's a shaker. Her eye is such that a lot of brown is concentrated inside a large ring.
Yeah.
So it's almost like at some point that individual went more introvert. They went more in, they went to interconnectedness. And so you can kind of look at that and make more sense of your own history as you look at the changes that have gone on in your eye.
Thank you. Really appreciate you guys showing up, and also Dr. Demetry, as always, fascinating information. Love having you.
Thanks
Please
for having me.
with him if you want any of these wonderful services. So we will get this recording out on to the Raising the Vibe site. Please, and then I'll send it out in the Raising the Vibe newsletter. So please share with your friends. It'll be hopefully up in a little bit, like maybe in a week or so. So thank you again, everyone.
Thanks for joining. It was
All right.
great. Take
Bye-bye.
care. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Yeah.